The sky over Fort Carson changed color at 6:47 in the morning. Captain Daniel Hayes was drinking coffee in the command center when Sergeant Lisa Morgan ran through the door, her face white with fear. The radar screens showed something impossible. Dozens of massive objects were falling through Earth's atmosphere toward North America. Daniel set down his coffee. The cup did not shake in his hand, but his mind was moving fast. In 20 years of military service, he had prepared for many things. This was not one of them. The objects on the radar were huge. The largest was the size of a city. They were falling through the sky with purpose, not burning up like normal space debris. "Get me everything," Daniel said to his team. "Satellite images, signal analysis, everything." Lieutenant Kevin Parks moved fast. His fingers flew across the keyboard. The satellite images came through seconds later. The objects were not falling randomly. They were moving into formation. They were slowing down. Something was controlling them. These were not accidents or natural events. These were ships. Alien ships. The communication systems began picking up a broadcast. It was in every language at once. The message was simple and clear. A voice that sounded like metal scraping against stone announced the arrival of the Zorkane Empire. The broadcast demanded the surrender of all Earth governments within 1 hour. Resistance would result in complete destruction of human civilization. Daniel read the message twice. Then he picked up the phone and called General Patricia Stone at the Pentagon in Washington. His voice was calm, but his mind was already making decisions. "We have hostile contact," he said. "Multiple large ships incoming. They are demanding surrender." The line was silent for 3 seconds. Then General Stone spoke. "I am receiving the same broadcast. The President is calling an emergency meeting. We are declaring a state of war. All military units are to assume combat positions. Do not fire unless fired upon. Wait for orders." Daniel hung up the phone. He looked at his team. These were good people. They had trained for combat. They had practiced for emergencies. But nothing in their training covered this moment. Nothing could prepare anyone for the moment when humanity learned it was not alone, and that the being sharing the universe wanted Earth dead. "Sound the alert," Daniel ordered. "Get every soldier awake and ready. We are going to war." The base transformed in minutes. Soldiers ran to their positions. Weapons were checked and prepared. Vehicles were fueled and loaded. Air defense systems were activated. The radar showed the alien ships slowing down. They were entering Earth's orbit. They were choosing their positions. Daniel watched the radar screen. The largest ship was moving toward the equator. Smaller ships were spreading across the planet. They were not attacking yet. They were establishing positions. They were confident. They believed the threat of annihilation would be enough to break human resistance. Captain Sarah Thompson was in the Air Defense Command Center. She looked at the information coming through and felt ice in her blood. The ships were enormous. The weapon systems on them had to be powerful beyond measure. But Sarah had been flying fighter jets for 15 years. She had faced difficult situations before. This was different, but she would not break. "Get our birds ready," she told her team. "I want every fighter we have in the air and armed. Do not engage unless they fire first, but be ready to fight." In the hospital, Dr. Kevin Patterson received the news from his administrator. An emergency order was being issued. All medical personnel were being kept on site. They would need to prepare for mass casualties. Kevin looked at his staff and saw fear. He understood the fear. He felt it too. But he also felt something else: determination. If soldiers were going to fight, they would need doctors. All across Earth, the message spread. Humanity was under attack. In Russia, soldiers moved to combat positions. In China, Air defense systems were activated. In Europe, fighter jets launched from bases. In the Middle East, ancient enemies put aside their conflicts. In Africa, soldiers prepared to defend their homes. In South America, commanders waited for orders. The hour passed. The alien deadline arrived and passed. No human government surrendered. All across the world, military commanders gave the same answer. Earth would not be conquered without a fight. Commander Vexter of the Zorkane Empire received the news with confusion. He had conquered 17 star systems. Most civilizations surrendered at the sight of his fleet. Humans were supposed to be primitive. Their weapons were supposed to be inferior. Their technology was supposed to be ancient. They should have fallen to their knees. Instead, he saw military formations. He saw fighters launching. He saw defense systems activating. He saw a species that did not understand defeat. Vexter was not concerned. He was annoyed. These primitive creatures did not realize they were facing the most powerful military force in the known galaxy. Annoyance would soon turn to action. He began preparing the landing forces. The conquest of Earth would begin. Daniel received word that the first alien landing would happen in the next hour. He stood in the command center and looked at the faces around him. These people trusted him to keep them alive. He did not know if he could do that, but he would try. "Listen up," he told his commanders. "This is what we are going to do. We are going to hold our positions. We are going to make them bleed. We are going to show them that humans do not break. We are going to show them that we will fight even when the odds are terrible. And we are going to win because that is the only option we have left." The commanders nodded. They understood. They had no choice but to understand. The sky turned fire red as the first alien ships began to land. Plasma beams shot down from above. Buildings burned. The ground shook. The war for humanity's survival had begun. Daniel Hayes gripped the edge of his console. His jaw was tight. His eyes were steady. Around him, soldiers prepared for battle. They were afraid, but they were ready. They were prepared to die if that was what their world required. The Zorkane had come to invade and conquer. They had not expected to find an enemy willing to fight back with everything they had. That mistake would cost them more than they could imagine. The first shots had been fired. Now, everything would change. 3 weeks into the invasion, something changed in the human response. The military commanders, who had been fighting desperate. Defensive battles began to shift to something new. Strategy. Real strategy. Colonel James Murphy sat in the Global Defense Coordination Center with maps showing every Zorkane position on Earth. He had been studying the aliens for weeks. He had watched how they fought. He had seen their patterns. And he had found weakness. The Zorkane are powerful individually, Murphy told the gathered commanders. But they think of war differently than we do. They rely on individual warrior strength. They do not coordinate as squads. They do not work together like we do. If we organize our soldiers into coordinated units, we can overcome their individual power through teamwork. The plan was controversial. It went against the normal way armies fought. But the commanders agreed. There was nothing to lose. Everything was already lost if they did not try something new. The new tactics worked. Squads of human soldiers began coordinating their attacks. While one team kept Zorkane warriors busy, other teams attacked from the sides. Coordinated fire from multiple soldiers could bring down even heavily armored aliens. The kill ratio began to shift. For the first time, human casualties began to drop while Zorkane casualties climbed. The aliens were shocked. They were losing warriors to creatures they considered primitive. Vexter ordered his troops to be more aggressive. But aggression only made them easier to kill when they charged into coordinated human defenses in a laboratory in California. Scientist Dr. Rachel Adams made a breakthrough. She discovered that Zorkane communication systems used a specific frequency. The aliens relied on constant communication with their command center. Without it, they lost coordination and became confused. Rachel worked with military electronics experts. They built devices that could jam the Zorkane communication frequency. Small units portable enough for soldiers to carry. When the jamming equipment was deployed, entire squads of Zorkane warriors became confused. They did not know where to go. They did not know what to do. Humans killed them easily. Vexter was forced to admit something he had never admitted before. His strategy was failing. The humans were better at something he had not considered. They were better at working together. They were better at adapting. They were turning his own invasion into a losing war. Lieutenant Alexandra Cross led a special forces team. Her unit's mission was to identify and target critical Zorkane positions. They worked behind enemy lines, gathering intelligence and eliminating key alien installations. Alexandra's team discovered something important. The Zorkane weapons required regular recalibration, and Earth's magnetic field was interfering with the calibration process. The aliens had not anticipated this. They had not planned for an environment where their technology would degrade over time. This information was shared with every human military unit. Soldiers were told to damage Zorkane weapons whenever possible. Every shot fired, every impact, degraded the alien weapons further. After weeks of fighting in Earth's environment, Zorkane weapons were not as powerful as they had been when they first landed. Meanwhile, Admiral Robert Carter was executing a different strategy in the oceans. Human submarines moved through the deep waters undetected by Zorkane sensors. These submarines attacked Zorkane landing ships that brought supplies and reinforcements. One by one, supply ships were sunk. Zorkane warriors on the ground began running out of ammunition. They began running out of food. They began running out of water. The aliens had assumed they would win quickly and had not planned for a long war. As supplies dwindled, Zorkane warriors became desperate. Desperate warriors made mistakes. Desperate warriors were easier to kill. Captain Sarah Thompson developed a new tactic with her fighter squadrons. Instead of direct attacks on Zorkane ground positions, the fighters attacked the alien landing craft. The ships could not fight back effectively while they were landing. By destroying landing ships, Sarah prevented new Zorkane reinforcements from reaching the ground. The alien forces on Earth began to realize something terrible. No more reinforcements were coming. The humans had cut off their supply lines. They were trapped on a hostile planet with weapons that were degrading and supplies that were running out. Vexter looked at his war situation and saw only catastrophe. He had invaded Earth with overwhelming force. He had expected quick victory. Instead, he had found an enemy that adapted faster than his warriors could overcome them. An enemy that worked together in ways that made them stronger. An enemy that refused to surrender even when facing extinction. The Zorkane commander made a decision that would change everything. He would commit all remaining forces to one final massive assault. One overwhelming attack that would destroy human command centers and shatter human will to resist. It was a desperate move, but desperation was all he had left. He began moving his forces into position. Every soldier not protecting his landing zone was pulled back to the main base. Every weapon, every vehicle, every piece of military equipment was gathered for the final assault. Human intelligence detected the movement. Daniel Hayes received reports of massive Zorkane troop movements toward Fort Carson and other major command centers. "They are coming for us," Hayes told his commanders. "All their forces. Everything they have left. This is the final attack. If we survive this, we win. If we fail, humanity is finished." The commanders looked at each other. They were terrified, but they were also ready. They had trained for this. They had prepared for this moment. "We hold our positions," Hayes continued. "We use everything we have. We kill as many as we can. And we do not give up. Not one step back. Not one position surrendered. We fight until we cannot fight anymore." The soldiers in the bases across Earth prepared for the final battle. They cleaned their weapons. They checked their ammunition. They wrote letters home that might never be sent. They understood what was coming. In the laboratories and weapons facilities, final preparations were made. The latest weapons were rushed to the front lines. The jamming equipment was expanded and improved. Soldiers received the best ammunition available. Sarah Thompson gathered her pilots. They would be flying continuous sorties during the assault. Many of them would not return. But they would not allow the Zorkane to establish air superiority. "This is it," Sarah told her pilots. "This is what everything has been leading to. This is where we prove that humans do not break. This is where we show them that we can win. Some of you will not come home. That is the cost of victory. But we will win." The Zorkane forces began their movement toward the human positions. Vexter believed that this attack would finally break human resistance. He did not understand that humans had already prepared for exactly this moment. The final battle was about to begin. Everything humanity was, everything it believed in, would be tested in the next hours. The survival of the species hung in the balance. But for the first time since the invasion began, humans had something they had not had before: hope. Real hope that victory was possible. The first wave of Zorkane soldiers hit the ground near Fort Carson like a hammer. They came down in transport pods that burned with heat as they crashed through the atmosphere. Each pod carried 6 warriors in armor that looked like dark metal with blue lights running through it. Their weapons fired bolts of pure plasma that turned stone to liquid and metal to ash. Sergeant Marcus Wells watched from his defensive position as the first pod landed 300 meters away. He had trained for combat his entire life. He had faced difficult situations in multiple wars across the world. Nothing had prepared him for this. The Zorkane soldiers stepped out of their pods like giants. They were 2.5 meters tall, with 4 arms and skin that looked like obsidian stone. Their eyes glowed with cold intelligence. Marcus ordered his squad to open fire. Bullets streamed from their weapons. The Zorkane soldiers did not even slow down. The bullets hit their armor and bounced off or burned away. The aliens raised their weapons and fired back. The sound was like thunder breaking apart. One of Marcus's soldiers, a young man named Daniel Rodriguez, simply stopped existing. He was there one moment and burned plasma the next. The Zorkane advanced. They moved with purpose and confidence. They knew their weapons were superior. They knew their armor could stop human weapons. They knew they were winning. Marcus ordered a retreat to the secondary position. His squad ran. Behind them, more soldiers from other units tried to hold the line. More Zorkane soldiers landed in new pods. Dozens became hundreds. The aliens spread across the landscape like a flood. Captain Sarah Thompson was in the air, watching everything from her fighter jet. She had 70 jets under her command. They were human technology, fast and agile, but their weapons were designed to fight other aircraft, not alien warriors. She watched as her first squadron approached the Zorkane position. "Squadron 3, make your attack run," she ordered. The fighters screamed through the sky. Their weapons fired. Missiles and bullets poured down on the Zorkane positions. Some of the aliens fell. Not many. Their armor protected them from the worst damage. But something important happened. The Zorkane who survived looked up at the sky with anger. They used their weapons on the jets. One of Sarah's pilots, Captain James Cooper, took a direct hit. His jet exploded in a ball of fire. He never ejected. He never even screamed. He just died doing his duty. Sarah felt rage fill her chest. She pushed it down. Anger made people make mistakes. She needed to think. She needed to find a way to hurt the aliens that worked in the hospital. Dr. Kevin Patterson was drowning in blood and pain. Wounded soldiers came in a constant stream. Some had third-degree burns from plasma weapons. Some had lost limbs. Some had injuries so severe that Kevin knew they were not going to survive. He saved who he could and comforted the rest. A soldier named Private Aaron Grant was brought in with severe burns on his entire body. Kevin knew the man would not last long. But Grant was awake, and his mind was clear. He grabbed Kevin's arm. "The aliens," Grant said through the pain. "They are slow. I saw it. They are strong, and their weapons are powerful, but they turn slow. If you hit them from the side, they cannot respond fast enough. Their armor is thick in front but thinner on the sides." Kevin listened. This was valuable information. He wrote it down carefully. When Grant finally stopped breathing, Kevin carried the information to an officer who could use it. The information spread through the human military. Commanders began changing tactics. They sent soldiers in small groups to attack from the sides and behind. It was still suicidal. The aliens still had overwhelming firepower. But for the first time, human soldiers started killing Zorkane warriors instead of just dying in a weapons laboratory near Denver. Engineer Patricia Lynn was working on something crazy. The Zorkane weapons fired plasma. Plasma was hot energy that burned through most materials. But Patricia understood something about plasma. It left a signature. It created a pattern in electromagnetic fields. She gathered a team of engineers and scientists. They worked without sleep. They modified human weapons to fire in patterns that interfered with Zorkane weapon systems. The modified bullets could not punch through Zorkane armor, but they could disrupt the energy fields that made the armor stronger. The first batch of modified ammunition was rushed to the front lines. Soldiers used them. The results were not perfect, but they were better than nothing. Zorkane armor started to fail. Aliens started to die. Commander Vexter was confused by human behavior. These creatures were supposed to be primitive. They were supposed to be broken. Instead, they were adapting. They were changing tactics. They were finding ways to hurt his warriors. This was not how conquest was supposed to work. Vexter ordered more troops to land. He sent in reinforcements. He committed more firepower. His plan was simple. Overwhelm the humans with numbers and firepower. Break their ability to resist. Make them surrender through sheer force. But human soldiers kept fighting. They did not break. They did not surrender. They died holding their positions. They died protecting their families. They died because they believed that surrender meant extinction. The fighting spread across the planet. In Russia, Zorkane forces pushed through the steppes but encountered fierce resistance from hardened soldiers. In Asia, the aliens landed and found humans ready to fight in mountains and valleys where technology meant less. In Europe and Africa, the same pattern repeated. Aliens landed expecting easy victory and found soldiers willing to die to stop them. Sarah Thompson developed new tactics for her fighter squadrons. She found that if the jets worked in coordinated patterns, they could damage Zorkane transport ships. She could not destroy the aliens, but she could slow them down. She could reduce the number of reinforcements they could bring to the battlefield. She lost more pilots. Some of the best pilots in the world died. But they were making a difference. In Fort Carson, Daniel Hayes stood in the command center and received reports from around the world. The casualty numbers were terrifying. Millions of humans were dead. Cities were burning. Civilization was falling apart. But the aliens were not winning as fast as they had expected. Humans were learning. Humans were adapting. Humans were finding ways to fight back. Daniel made a decision. He called commanders from every nation on Earth. The time for fighting as separate nations was over. They would coordinate. They would share information. They would fight as one species against the invaders. Within hours, the Global Defense Coordination Center was established. Commanders from every nation worked together. Information was shared instantly. Tactics were coordinated across continents. When one region found a successful strategy, it was sent to all other regions. The Zorkane began to realize something was changing. The humans were not just fighting back. They were getting better at fighting back. Their weapons were improving. Their tactics were evolving. They were working together in ways that seemed impossible. For such a divided species, Vex. Tar watched the reports and finally felt something he had never felt before. Doubt. These humans were supposed to be primitive. They were supposed to be weak. But they were showing something else. They were showing the ability to adapt faster than his warriors could overcome them. The conquest was taking longer than planned. But Vexter was committed. He had never lost a conquest. Earth would be no different. He would just need to be patient and brutal. He would need to use more force. The second week of the invasion began with the Zorkane using weapons they had not used before. Orbital strikes from their ships in space. Entire cities were destroyed. Millions died in seconds. But humanity still did not surrender. Humans still fought back. The war was far from over. But something important had changed. Humanity had proven that it could bleed the enemy. It was time to prove that humanity could win. The assault came at dawn. The sky erupted with fire as Zorkane forces moved forward with everything they had. Plasma bolts burned through the air. The ground shook from the impact of massive assault vehicles that looked like nothing Earth had ever seen before. Thousands of Zorkane warriors charged forward in a coordinated wave of destruction. Fort Carson was ready. Soldiers crouched behind reinforced positions. They had anti-tank weapons loaded. They had coordinated fire teams in place. They had jamming equipment running at full power. When the first wave of Zorkane warriors came into range, they did not hesitate. Sergeant Marcus Wells fired. Next to him, Private Aaron Jackson fired. To their left, Corporal Michelle Hayes fired. The coordinated fire was deadly. Zorkane warriors fell. But more kept coming. The aliens pushed forward with overwhelming force. Marcus fell, hit by a plasma bolt that burned through his chest. He died thinking of his wife and children. He died believing that his death meant something. Jackson screamed and charged at the nearest Zorkane, firing his weapon. He went down too, but he took 2 Zorkane warriors with him. The battle spread across the base. Hand-to-hand combat erupted in multiple locations. Humans fought with guns, grenades, and knives. They fought with tools. They fought with their bare hands when they had to. They fought because surrender was not an option. Colonel James Murphy coordinated the defense from the command center. He had positioned soldiers in 3 defensive layers. When the first layer was overrun, the second layer fell back and engaged. When the second layer could not hold, the third layer moved forward. It was a coordinated retreat that turned into a series of ambush. Each time the Zorkane pushed forward, they encountered concentrated fire from prepared positions. Each time they thought they had broken through, they found new defensive lines waiting. The aliens were losing warriors at a rate they had never experienced before. Captain Sarah Thompson was in her fighter jet, making her 7th attack run of the day. She had already flown 5 hours. Her body was shaking with exhaustion. But she could not stop. The Zorkane were trying to establish air superiority. If they succeeded, the battle on the ground would be lost. Sarah's fighter screamed toward a Zorkane command ship. She fired her weapons. Missiles streaked through the air. Some hit, some missed. The command ship was damaged but not destroyed. Sarah pulled up hard and accelerated away from return fire. She had one more missile. She had one more chance. She turned her fighter around and lined up for another attack run. This time, she would not miss. She fired the last missile. It streaked toward the command ship's weapon system. Direct hit. The system exploded. The command ship lost its primary weapons. Sarah turned to head back to base when Zorkane fire hit her jet. The impact was catastrophic. The engine died. The controls became useless. Sarah ejected. She fell toward the ground, her parachute opening below her, watching as her jet crashed into the mountains. In the hospital, Dr. Kevin Patterson was drowning. Not in water, but in wounded soldiers and dying aliens. The hospital had been converted into a war zone. There were Zorkane warriors in the lower levels, fighting against human soldiers. There were injured humans everywhere. Kevin moved between wounded soldiers, doing what he could. A young woman named Private Karen Lewis was brought in with burns covering half her body. Kevin worked on her while bombs exploded nearby. He saved her life, or at least gave her a chance to live long enough to see if survival was possible. An alien warrior burst through a door. Kevin grabbed a weapon from a dead soldier. He had never fired a gun in his life. He raised it at the Zorkane and fired. The bullets bounced off the alien's armor. The Zorkane raised its weapon. A soldier named Private David Chun threw himself in front of the alien fire. He was burned away completely, but his action gave Kevin time to run and pull a fire alarm that triggered a chemical spray. The spray was not designed to hurt aliens, but it was caustic and it burned. The Zorkane screamed and retreated. Kevin kept working. He kept saving lives. He kept refusing to surrender. In the command center, Daniel Hayes received a report that made his blood cold. The Zorkane had located his position. They were coming for him directly. A massive force was moving toward the base, trying to eliminate human command authority in one strike. Hayes understood what this meant. If the Zorkane killed the command structure, the human military would fall apart. The war would be lost. Everything they had fought for would be for nothing. Hayes made a decision. "Get everyone out," he ordered. "Everyone except command staff. Get the soldiers to the secondary positions. Move the wounded to the underground shelters." His officers looked at him. They understood what he was suggesting. The command staff would stay. The command staff would hold the position until everyone else could escape. The command staff would die. "Do it," Hayes said. "That is an order." The evacuation began. Soldiers grabbed wounded comrades and ran. The hospital staff grabbed critical equipment. The civilians who had been sheltering in the base moved toward the exits. Colonel James Murphy approached Hayes. "Sir, we should move too," Murphy said. "We can coordinate from the secondary command center." Hayes shook his head. "No, the Zorkane are coming for us specifically. If we move, they will follow. They will hit the secondary center. This position is where we make our stand." Murphy understood. He nodded and returned to his position. The Zorkane assault force arrived minutes later. It was massive. Hundreds of warriors in full combat gear. Vehicles that carried plasma cannons. Equipment that should have been unstoppable. Hayes and his command staff opened fire. They had known this attack was coming. They had prepared for it. Explosives hidden in the base were detonated. Buildings collapsed on top of the Zorkane warriors. Fuel depots were ignited. The command center became a fortress and a death trap. The fighting was ferocious. The Zorkane pushed forward, but every meter cost them warriors. The humans had nothing to lose. They fought with desperation and determination. They fought knowing they were going to die, but determined to make it cost the aliens everything. Hayes fought. He used every weapon he had. He organized his command staff into coordinated fire teams. He directed explosions to maximize damage to the Zorkane forces. He refused to surrender. He refused to retreat. He stood and fought until the end. The Zorkane commander in charge of the assault realized something was wrong. The humans were not breaking. They were not surrendering. They were dying. That they were dying fighting. And their death was taking more Zorkane warriors than he expected. But the Zorkane had numbers. They had firepower. They were pushing through the defenses. Soon they would overwhelm the command center. Soon this human resistance would be broken. Then something unexpected happened. Above the base, human fighter jets appeared. They had been held in reserve for exactly this moment. Sarah Thompson, flying in a borrowed fighter, led the assault. Her pilots attacked the Zorkane forces surrounding the command center. The Zorkane commander looked up and realized his mistake. He had committed everything to taking one position. He had left himself vulnerable in other places. Sarah's attack, combined with Murphy's coordinated defense, was enough. The Zorkane assault force was broken. The warriors who survived retreated. The siege of the command center was lifted, but the cost had been terrible. Hundreds of humans were dead. The command center was destroyed. The base was in ruins. Daniel Hayes survived, though barely. He was wounded in multiple places, but he was alive. And more importantly, the human military command structure had held. The command center had been defended. The Zorkane assault had been stopped. Vexter received reports of his assault force's failure. He had sent his best warriors. He had sent overwhelming force. And they had been stopped by a species he had considered primitive. For the first time, Vexter understood that he had made a terrible mistake. He had underestimated his enemy. He had assumed that technology and individual warrior strength would be enough. He had not understood the nature of human determination. The invasion was failing. The conquest that was supposed to be quick and easy was becoming a disaster. Vexter faced a choice. Continue fighting and lose everything, or find a way to withdraw before more Zorkane warriors died. The choice was humiliating, but it was also the only choice left. The Zorkane retreat began slowly at first. Units that had been attacking human positions suddenly fell back. At first, human commanders thought it was a trick. They waited for a renewed assault. But the assault never came. Instead, Zorkane forces began consolidating. They pulled back to their main landing zones. They stopped attacking. They stopped moving forward. For the first time in weeks, the pressure eased. Daniel Hayes received reports from every front. The Zorkane were retreating everywhere. North America, Europe, Asia, Africa, South America. The aliens were pulling their forces back. The invasion was ending. Hayes wanted to believe it, but he was cautious. He ordered his commanders to maintain defensive positions. He did not trust that this was real. He had learned to be careful with the Zorkane. Then a message came. It was from Commander Vexter. He wanted to negotiate. He wanted to discuss terms. Hayes called an emergency meeting. He assembled his top commanders. Colonel Murphy, Captain Sarah Thompson, who had survived the crash and was limping from burns, Lieutenant Alexandra Cross, Admiral Robert Carter, Dr. Kevin Patterson, who had been brought in because the medical situation was critical. It could be a trap, Murphy said. It could be, Hayes agreed. But if they are willing to negotiate, we should listen. We have bled them. We have shown them they cannot win. Maybe they are ready to accept that. The negotiation took place in neutral territory, a devastated city that had been equally destroyed by both sides. Hayes arrived with guards, but without a large military force. Vexter arrived with a single guard. The alien commander was different than Hayes had imagined. He looked tired. His armor was damaged in multiple places. His eyes, which had seemed so cold in intelligence reports, now looked defeated. "You have fought well," Vexter said. "Better than any species I have ever conquered." "We were fighting for our survival," Hayes replied. "Humans do not give up when survival is at stake." "That has become clear," Vexter said. He paused. "I am withdrawing my forces. The invasion has failed. I will not risk more warriors. You have defeated the Zorkane Empire." Hayes felt something break inside him. Relief. It was finally over. Humanity had survived. "My government will require your word," Hayes said. "A formal agreement that the Zorkane will not return. That you will not attack Earth again." Vexter considered this. Then he nodded. "I give my word as a Zorkane commander. Earth will not be attacked by the Zorkane. You have earned peace through blood." The withdrawal began immediately. Zorkane landing ships powered up. The massive alien vessels that had brought the invaders to Earth began to lift off. They rose into the sky, leaving trails of fire as they left the atmosphere. Humanity watched the ships disappear into space. In the following weeks, the damage was calculated. Millions were dead. Entire cities had been destroyed. The global economy was in ruins. Civilization itself had been shattered, but humanity was alive. Sarah Thompson received word that she had been promoted to General. She was assigned to lead the reformation of human air forces. She accepted the duty with understanding of its weight. Alexandra Cross was offered a position in the new Global Military Command. She accepted. Her experience fighting behind enemy lines made her valuable to a new world order. Colonel James Murphy retired from active service. He had done his part. Others would need to take the burden now. Dr. Kevin Patterson returned to his hospital. It took him months to process what he had seen, but he kept working. He kept saving lives. He kept fighting death, which was his own personal war. In Fort Carson, Daniel Hayes stood in what remained of his office. The walls were scarred. The equipment was destroyed, but the flag still hung, though it was burnt and torn. A young officer, Lieutenant Marcus Chen, approached him. Marcus had survived the final assault. He had fought at the command center's defense. "Sir, what happens now?" Marcus asked. Hayes looked at the flag. "Now we rebuild," he said. "We rebuild our cities. We rebuild our military. We rebuild our world. But we do it differently. We do it together. We do it as one species, not as divided nations." "Do you think they will come back?" Marcus asked. "The aliens?" "Maybe," Hayes said. "Probably not. But we will be ready if they do. That is what we learned in this war. We are stronger together than apart." The aliens did not expect that. They learned a hard lesson. Word of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy. Species that had feared the Zorkane, that had bowed to their demands, now saw hope. The most powerful civilization in the known galaxy had been defeated by humans. Humans were not the primitive species the Zorkane had claimed. Humans were capable. Humans were dangerous. Humans had to be respected. Governments of Earth called for a united world. The United Nations was transformed. It became the Terran Federation, a true global government with one military, one purpose, one voice. President Elizabeth Morrison addressed the entire world. "We have been tested in fire," she said. "We have been pushed to the edge of extinction. But we did not break. We adapted. We learned. We came together as one species. Now we must use that unity to build a better world. A world where everyone has food and shelter. A world where children do not have to fear invasion. A world where we are strong enough to face any challenge." Months passed. The dead were buried. The cities were rebuilt. New ships were built, faster and stronger than any human had created before. They were built with Zorkane technology that human scientists had salvaged from the destroyed weapons and damaged armor. Daniel Hayes was offered the position of Supreme Commander of the Terran Federation military. He accepted on one condition: that he report to a civilian government, not to a single leader. That power would be shared. Soldiers follow orders, he explained to the new government. But soldiers serve people, never the other way around. Sarah Thompson's fighter squadrons became the pride of the new human military. They were fast. They were deadly. They were trained by pilots who had learned to fight an alien enemy and won. 2 years after the invasion ended, Daniel Hayes stood on a hillside overlooking Fort Carson. The base had been rebuilt. It was stronger now. It had been learned from. Sarah Thompson joined him. She was in her uniform, now wearing the rank of general. "Do you think we did the right thing?" she asked. "All those people died. Billions of people died." "Yes," Hayes said. "We did the right thing. We fought. We refused to surrender. We showed that even when facing extinction, humans will stand and fight. That is what it means to be human." They stood in silence, watching the rebuilt base in the distance. "Some of the scientists think the aliens will come back eventually," Sarah said. "Different species, different empires. They think news of what happened will bring others. Then we will be ready," Hayes said. "Humanity now knows what we are capable of. We know that we can fight and win against impossible odds. That will not change. That will never change." Far in space, on a Zorkane world, Commander Vexter wrote his report to the Zorkane Council. He described the invasion in detail. He described what had happened. He described how he had failed. The Council did not execute him. Instead, they promoted him. They made him the Zorkane ambassador to humanity. His punishment was to live knowing that a species he had considered inferior had defeated him. His reward was the chance to understand them better. When Vexter received news of his new assignment, he felt something unexpected: respect. Deep respect for the humans who had beaten his army. Humanity had proven something in that terrible war. It had proven that humans were not weak. It had proven that humans would not break. It had proven that humans could stand against the galaxy and demand respect. Earth would never be the same. Neither would humanity. Both had been forged in fire, tested to the limit, and had emerged not just surviving, but transformed. The age of human weakness was over. The age of human strength had begun. And on that hillside, Daniel Hayes and Sarah Thompson watched their world move forward into a future they had secured through blood and sacrifice. They had paid the terrible price. Now they would live in the world they had saved.